All right. Well, this is Gary with Pro Tracker again. Today's Thursday, and I just want to ask everybody a couple of things. First of all, where it's getting close to the hunt, you got to have your tags in. Remember to get your tags put in for your draws. You got various states. Utah is actually, today is the last day. Arizona's coming up. Wyoming elk is already over, but you still got mule deer. Idaho, you still got later on in the next month or so. So just check your regulations. Make sure you know when you have to apply for your permits. But I want to encourage you to do that. Today I want to talk about arrows. Everybody on arrows, I guess, has their favorite kind. And I'm just going to kind of go over what the arrows are and what they do. This is just a typical arrow right there. That's a typical arrow. It's got some nice fletchings on the end. The other end, you've got an inserted nock. Screw your broadhead in. That's your typical arrow. Now your standard diameter, I'll kind of go over a little bit on that, what that means. A standard is a 6.5 exterior. That's the outside diameter. Depending on what brand of arrow you'll buy, sometimes they categorize them and use them in different points on how wide or what the interior diameter. Like, for example, this is a 2.65 inside diameter, where you go down to a micro and it even is smaller. That doesn't mean a whole awful lot other than the durability and the strength of the arrow. The thicker the arrow, the stronger it will be. Now this happens to be, it's a 3K weave. It's a graphite carbon arrow, very, very strong. And if you're going to be hunting, you want to make sure you have as strong of an arrow as you possibly can buy. Now they come in different grades, and different grades means different prices. Now arrows also come in a spine. Even though this is a standard arrow, it's a 6.5 outside, and it's a 2.64 on the inside diameter. They come in different spines. They'll come in 400, 340, 300, and 250. Now I'm talking about the hunting line. If you want to go up into more of the competition, then you go into the 400s, 450s, 500, even 600. That means they're a lighter spine arrow, but it's also a lighter arrow. So a lighter arrow. When you hunt, what you want to do, and this is according to where my experience and what I know on hunting big game like elk, mule deer, antelope, when you hit that animal with your arrow, you want to have as much punch as you possibly can. So that's why you want to have weight. Now an arrow, if you shot an arrow just like it is right here without any weight, it's going to be erratic all over until it gets to the point of impact. So this arrow might be above on the target. The next one you shoot might be down. So you have to add weight. So you want to put a broadhead on there if you're hunting, or a field tip if you're just practicing. Now I'm going to pick on a field tip. So a field tip is easy. All you do is just screw it in, lock it in. Now it's ready to go. Nice and tight. A broadhead is different. How a broadhead works is, let's take this one right here. So I'll take it off. Now you can see that broadhead. This actually happens to be a 3-blade Wacom. Now Wacom is a good broadhead. There's a lot of different kinds, but this is a fixed blade. Now to make this even a little better, what I recommend is to put an O-ring. And what that O-ring is, it's a little tiny, see that? Just a little tiny ring. And put it on your broadhead. So when you screw it on, it tightens up and it holds it in place no matter what you're doing. As you're walking to when you go hunting, say to a blind or a tree stand or even spot and stock, you don't want this to become loose. This one here, I've already put one on. What I recommend is just get it started until it's snug, and then this is a little tool to help tighten that on. You don't want to get your fingers cut. All you do is slide it in, rotate it just a little bit till you think it's just about right. Now, nice and tight. Now, this is a fixed blade on a standard shaft arrow. Remember, standard shaft, 6.5 exterior diameter. Now we're going to pick up, and we call it a micro. This is a micro arrow. And what this is, it is actually a 4 millimeter on the exterior diameter. The exterior, but the interior is a 166.166. Now you notice I don't have a knock on there. Knocks come in various different styles and designs. This is actually a pressure fit. So that's a pressure fit. All you do is slide it in. And then you have to make sure you push this in tight. So I'll just go up here on my desk, lock it in. Now, nice and tight. Now, if you notice, I've got 3 different colors of fletches. My fletch that I want to use is my guide, so that I know every time I put it in my bow and up on my rest, it's always in the same position. That is my black one. But you want your knock to line up so when you put it on your bowstring, it automatically centers this on your bowstring on your bow. So you'll have to rotate. A lot of times it's easier to have it on the string of the arrow. Let's move it back over here so that it's in line with the black fletch. So it's in line. So that's your micro. Now, if you look on this arrow, I've actually got some shrink tube on there. Now, we at Protractor have developed a product to add more weight to the front of these arrows, and it's called the Bad Boy sleeve. And what you'll do is you just put it on, slide it down, slide it over the top of the shrink tube. I'll just use a fill tip so I don't get cut. Lock it on. And what that does is that you can use a smaller diameter arrow, a micro. We'll just call it that, a micro. So as it pulls back up on the rest, it'll catch that and just automatically lift it up without any drag or catching on the edges. That works very, very well. That's a micro. Now, micros come the same as what your standard arrows. They come in different spines. Now, don't get too confused. Spines, all it means is the flex in an arrow. See how that kind of flexes? When an arrow is pushed, when it leaves your bow, it pushes onto your nock and it causes what they call a paradox. That arrow will actually flex as it's rotating, going to the target that you've shot at. But by the time it gets there, that paradox has come down to where now it's just going straight. So the longer distance you shoot, the more it's going to be in an incline up and down. The shorter distance, it's not going to have quite as radical of an incline upon impact. Now remember, spine, micros come in, well, if you're shooting target, a lot of target users have higher spines. They'll have the 5, the 400s, then even the 350s or 340s, depending on what model and brand of arrows you're using, and 300s. The micros don't go any lower than the 300 spines. Now on an arrow, you want the arrow to make sure that it's as true as it possibly can. Now what you can take is an arrow spine tester. And I'm going to put this in there. I'm going to adjust this down so you can look and watch. Now, if you can see, let's take bad boy off so you can actually look and see what this does. Upon rotation, you want it to be as close to the same as it possibly is. You don't want too much of a wobble. I'll just slowly rotate. See how that spins very, very well? That's a very balanced, and that's a good arrow. Now, depending on the cost that you use and spend on your arrows, depending on how true and straight they are. Now, here's another arrow. See on the front here how even. It doesn't move around. On the back, same thing, back here towards the fletch. Watch that. See that? Spins the same way. Let me move everything so you can see it. There we go. There's no wobble to it. That is a very straight and a good shooting arrow. Now, arrows come in different weights, depending on your length, depending on what you put on as a broadhead, and other things. Now, broadheads come in 75, 85, 100 grains, 125s, 150s. They go on up. Now, broadheads, just because they're heavier doesn't mean that they are a better broadhead, because they're still the same size. But adding that weight to it, you have to keep adjusting your pins. So if I sight my bow in, I have to use that same weight of a broadhead all the time in order to hit the same position that I've sighted that bow in with. So 100 grain, let's pick a 100 grain. This is a 100 grain Wacom. Once I sight this bow in with it, then it'll hit in the same place using the same pins regardless. But if I take this and I put the bad boy on, it's going to lift it up. So I'm going to slide it on the shaft of the arrow. This is the same arrow, just a different one without the broadhead. So let's kind of think that this is a broadhead. Now see how this is bigger in diameter? As you pull it back upon the arrow, this will actually lift up automatically and compensate for that weight using the same pins. Using 100 grain broadhead, I can hit in the same positions, whether it's 20, 30, or 40 yards. That's what this will do. Now I'm going to show you how a scale works. Different arrows will weigh different grains depending on the length and depending on how strong of an arrow that is. If you've got a real thin walled arrow, it's not going to have as much weight. They will fly faster, but they won't have the impact, the momentum in order to carry that through if you're hunting. You need to have a heavier impact at the front of that arrow. So ProTracker has actually built and developed arrows that will accomplish that, and with accessories. So this arrow, and let's just weigh it without anything on it. Doesn't have other than the fletch and the knock. Watch down here and you can see if you can see my scale. Hopefully you'll be able to see what it says on there. I'll turn it on. I'll kind of read to you what it is. All right, so it's zeroed out. I've added this arrow. Now this arrow is cut for my length and it weighs 300, looks like 310 grains. 310, that's without a broadhead. Now if I add a fill tip to it, and let's take a fill tip, and this should be, I believe, 100 grain fill tip. Now let's see what that weighs. That weighs 410. So you've actually added 100 grains. Fill tips, spine, this actually is a 300 spine. Is spines important? Absolutely. Grain weight of your broadheads, grain weight of the, if you add bad boys on the front for penetration, momentum, and accuracy, this is a 125. So I can add that to it. And then a grain weight of the length of the arrow. So when you buy the arrows, They're not cut. They're at 32 inches. They could be, say, 9.10 grains per inch. So every inch you cut off that, you have to take that off. So mine actually weighs 310 grains. That's with the knock and the inserts. The insert on the end, and also one knock, 310 grains. Then I add 100 grain fill tip, or 100 grain broadhead brings it back up. Now, is a fixed broadhead the only broadhead you can use? Absolutely not. I'm going to show you another one. This is on an arrow that Protractor's developed, and it's called the Cobra. If you notice on the front of the arrow, it's the same diameter. It is a 6.5 millimeter. And on the front of this, I have an expandable. So that's an expandable broadhead. And it's by Sever. And upon impact, these will open up and cut me a 2 to a 2¼ inch cut into that animal. So it's a little bit wider than it would be with a fixed blade. Do they work great? Absolutely. Do the fixed blades work great? Yes, they do. They all work great. Now, on this arrow, as it goes down towards the back, it actually reduces itself down to a micro. So now it's got a micro on the end of this arrow. What that accomplishes is, upon impact, it cuts a hole. And then as the arrow is going through, because this is dragging on the wound, as it tapers down, you've got less friction and less drag. So you've got deeper penetration using technology development. This is a 3-spined arrow. Shoots very accurate, shoots very strong because it's built strong. And then on the end, you have a micro, so you don't have that drag. That's what technology is. That's what it does, is it increases all of the things that work, all incorporated into one arrow. That's the Cobras by Bad Boy. There you can see that's the expandable broadhead. So weight, spine, the type of arrow, the type of broadhead, they all add up. Now, do they all work? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I can tell you one thing that doesn't work. If you don't practice, you're not going to be as happy with what you've accomplished, either in practice, in target, or hunting. You got to practice. You got to practice. Now, remember, you got to use the same equipment that you practice with as you hunt with. If you don't, you're not going to get the same results. Remember, same results, you have to have it the same way. Shoot the same way, use the same equipment, shoot the same broadhead, same arrows. Once you get everything dialed in practice, get familiar. 20 yards, 30 yards, 40 yards, 50 yards. Get back to where you feel real comfortable. The easiest way to where you can always be as consistent as you possibly can be is practice at 20 yards, really, till you get really proficient to it. 30 yards, really, really proficient. And then you can go on those longer distances. The majority of your animals are not going to be that far out. You want to make sure it's a good ethical kill. And I'm not going to say that you can't shoot animals out there farther. It's just that sometimes if they take even a half step from 70, 80 yards, that could be a foot, foot and a half. All you have to do is take one little half step, and you've sighted right where the vitals are. Now you're back into where maybe the belly is. So practice. So get proficient at 30 and 40 yards. So if you do have one come in at 30, 40 yards, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
You're going to pop him with that arrow, and you can be successful.
Also runs in the barn.
Now, with Protractor, if you've got any questions, you can call myself, you can call our office. But I just want to just let everybody know that hunting is fun.
May be wrong.
We want you to be an ethical hunter. We want you to recover your game, and we want you to be safe. Always let somebody know where you're hunting. Let everybody know the area you're going. You need to make sure that your health is in check. You know, if you're not feeling the way you should, then maybe wait till the next day or go next week. And then what you need to do is always make sure that you have the best equipment that you can afford and the best broadheads, best equipment. This is Gary with Pro Tracker. I want to thank everybody that's on today. If you got any questions, like I was kind of alluding to, call myself at 801-608-0190, and I'll try to answer any questions you've got. Do I want to say which broadhead, which bow, which anything is better? No, they're all good. Practice with what you have. Give me a call. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thanks.